Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to this new edition of the Meet the Leader series. Today, we'll welcome and hear from Elisa de Martel, CFO at Waymo. So I'm Anne-Emmanuelle, I'm the Executive Director of the French-American Chamber of Commerce of San Francisco, FACCSF, a nonprofit member-driven organization who helps companies and entrepreneurs settle, expand, grow, develop, network in California. I didn't know. Oh, can you please just make sure that you're all on mute because we can hear some people. Yeah, thank you. And this series today is brought to you by our Women Leadership Committee, co-chaired by Isabelle Marcus and Catherine Levy. And I'll just pass the floor to Isabelle, who will do a very small and quick introduction for Elisa.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are extremely glad to welcome Elisa de Martel, whose exemplary career leadership and strategic business planning is a true inspiration. Elisa's impressive career international journey began in Madrid with PwC before joining Citroën in the UK. She then steered the financial course at Apple in California with us for a remarkable decade as a manufacturing finance director. Elisa then transitioned to the CFO role at Carbon, a company in 3D printing. And most recently, her leadership prowess in finance led her at the helm of Waymo's finance as a CFO. So we are eager to hear from you, Elisa, more about your career path and what drives you. I give you the mic.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. And thank you for this introduction, Isabelle. That's really, really nice way to frame what I've done. So but the question, what drives me? I think, the first thing I say is always like challenge, learning, always try to get, to be confronted to new things, and always the next step, always go for the extra mile, I'd say.
Right. And about your, let's go, Catherine, sorry.
Yeah, and so I think everybody here is curious because we heard all the great steps in your career. So, you know, what moved you from one of these steps to the other, and especially how did you land in your current position as a CFO for Waymo? So if you can tell us a little bit more about your steps, especially in the US, that would be, I think, great.
So I can't say that from the beginning, you know, it was all planned that I would end up here where I am. It appears that in retrospect, when you look at like all of it, it feels like it was kind of like the perfect fit. And why that? It's because, so first, yes, CFO, I've always been in finance. I always loved numbers, spreadsheet, and convert, you know, any story into numbers. So that's always been, you know, the thread all along my career. After internationally, I've always been interested in working abroad, in having like different learning different cultures, working in different environments. Ended up I started like very soon after business school, went to England to do a master's there, and that's a little bit where it started. So and even I could say in business school too, I also did international finance, which I don't really know what it meant, but still it was like international, so always with that in mind. So that's a little bit, you know, how like the international came into play, and after it was like little by little, everything, I mean, built on each other. Mm-hmm. So how I ended up, I think I got lucky at one point to enter, you know, tech, because I did join Apple when I was still in England, still in the UK, and that's where the big shift happened. And at the time, so like I love to say sometimes, it was before the iPhone. So it was Apple, like, you know, just had restarted. You know, they had a very tough time in the 90s, and they were like really growing again with the iPod. And that's why I felt, it looks like a very interesting. And I got the opportunity, you know, to join Apple. And that's how I did the shift. And after like the international was like, okay, Apple looks like they might have a lot of opportunities in California. So why not try to go there? So that's how I ended up here in the Valley, and how I ended up at Waymo. So that was like the combination of having like experience, because I worked at Citroën, which was a car manufacturer, and
Correct.
tech. And after small company, I joined a startup, and big company, I had been at Apple. So the combination of the big, small, and the technology. So both the automotive industry as well as like connected hardware with Apple meant like it felt, yeah, at the time it felt, but when you're in the job, that's where you realize that effectively there's a lot of things that feel a little bit like a deja vu. So
That seems indeed like a wonderful, combination of skills and different experiences. Just out of curiosity, because you stayed quite a long time with Apple, right? More than 10 years or something like that. And it was probably super interesting. So what made you leave? Because of not a lot of people leave Apple and to go to a smaller company, right? So I'm just curious about this move.
No, that's very interesting. So Apple is a very interesting company in the sense that people, you're right, stay there and stay there for a long time. So I don't know if you know the story, but Tim Cook was brought in like in 98 when Steve Jobs was looking for someone to help, with operations. And the team in operation and the leadership team at Apple, most of them have been there since then. So they've been in their job for 25 years. And when I joined in Cupertino in FP&A, my boss had been in the same role for 14 years, exact same role. And for me, that been like I started saying, I like challenges and always change and learn more. And I need to change. I always need to add more and change and not stay always in the same areas. So that's what I did at Apple, where I was a little bit of like the odd person there, because I started in sales finance, went into corporate FP&A, and went after in ops finance. But it was so hard internally to do that transition, even because in their mindset is like you're the expert in your area and you stay there. There was also that notion is like, especially like in ops finance, then the question at one point was like, oh, you don't want to become native. And native means you become like an operator. No, I'm more interested in finance. And I wanted to have like a broader scope. So I looked around at Apple, what else I could do after I had done these three, and there was not much left. After it was R&D finance, for people who know, but it's not super interesting as such because it's just people spend. So that's how like I felt like, okay, so if I want to have like a broader finance overview, Apple may not be the right spot. And carbon came as an opportunity, so it was right timing.
Correct.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And yes, sometimes in these big tech giants, yeah, when you are not in product, it's indeed more difficult to expand your scopes sometimes. And switching gears a little bit, because I know that a lot of people that join are probably super interested about Waymo and, driverless cars. So without, of course, disclosing anything confidential, we'd love to hear your insider perspective on the state of the industry for driverless car. Where do you think this is going? This is indeed so innovative. So how do you see the future of driverless cars?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is that it's often in the press. We talk about it a lot, and we have like with Elon Musk also, and now it's like top of his agenda. I don't know if you follow, but it's nearly in the newspapers like every day. I think it's been in the press on and off for a long time. Waymo was started in 2009. Not Waymo as such, but the project was started in 2009. Waymo as such in 2017. And there was like, the expectation that they would like be already, like you would see driverless cars, in the street, like faster than what we've seen. So there was a bit of a hype, and after a little bit like down, and now it looks like it's picking up again. But especially because we are successful. It's true that now it's working. You can see it for the ones who are in San Francisco. We have all the cars there. But it's been showing how hard of a journey and how difficult it is to replicate, because think about it, it's a software robot replicating a human brain. So being able to do that, it's really hard. But it looks like, I had heard before I joined, oh, what, Waymo, they know how to do it. Why don't they scale faster? Why isn't that faster? And it's all about safety first. So it's just doing it in a way that you want to be successful. Look, I mean, you've read also, I'm sure, like some competitors were not as like cautious in the way they implemented, the technology, and now, well, so it looks like now we're a little bit like not really on our own. It's not true, because you have a lot, the Chinese are there, there's still quite a few startups that are trying, but it's also difficult because it's very capital intensive. So not many small companies can do that. But in the trend, I think, I mean, the mission, it's still there. We've demonstrated it's possible. Again, now what's really super exciting is we are in this scale time. And so we've announced, Austin, LA. So we started also paid trips last week. So if you want to go, you should try also in LA. So it's Santa Monica and that we are, yeah. And we have the first cars in Austin. It's not yet open to the public, but it will come by the end of the year. So that's
okay. So you're expanding to new cities. That's great. By the way, I'm not sure if how many people in the attendance have tried, and I'm not sure how. But that would be fun. What kind of reactions do you have usually from people who use the robo taxis? Does it become part of their usual way? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so that's the effectively interesting. When people try it and test it, yeah, they love it. And they're, wow, there's the wow effect, and that's super. And that's really fun when you go with people like for the first time and you see like taking videos and that. So it's very nice to see. What's also super interesting, and I also listen to podcasts, and that it's after like a minute or two, you just forget. It's like it becomes the norm. So that's the thing, is how then after you just build the relationship with the customer, so that it comes back, and it was not just, oh, I wanted to try once, and it was nice, it was fun, but I place it like on the same spectrum as like an Uber or Lyft, is how then do we build the differentiation and the product, the position. So that's all what we're learning also right now. So it's super interesting to go through that learning process.
And talking about learning process, indeed, um, I'm sure that there are specific, I would say, challenges or constraints or even opportunities due to the fact that it's so innovative, so compared maybe to your previous roles. How is it different to be at the helm of something that's so disruptive?
Carbon, was 3D printing, and the idea was to do industrial 3D printing, which doesn't really exist. They use it only for prototype. So it was also so the parallel you could do in both is really like how do you transform like that a technology into something that's commonly used? And of course, to do that, a lot is like cost driven. People, even if it's great and innovative, at the end of the day, and that's what we receive, sometimes as comment, oh, Waymo's more expensive than Uber or that, So it's true that being able to provide both a great product, great technology, but at the same time at an affordable price. So that's really now, where we're trying to get to, and that's in that sense that yeah, it's innovative, but so much as like after it needs to become mainstream.
And Elisa, how do you drive sustainability within your role as CFO?
So you mean that, yeah, for the planet, anything I can do or that with my little.
And within the company, I mean, how do you drive the sustainability business model of Waymo? I mean, what is your within your role? I mean, are you able to influence somehow and push Waymo towards more sustainability compared to cost? I mean, how do you see your role?
Yeah. And versus cost. So that's a very good question, because it's sometimes, yeah, you want to try, you want to push it. So I can take two examples, like one from carbon and one from Waymo. So carbon, for instance, that, so it was polymer. So it was really like using some resin. And the idea is that you produce parts that are just in time, and at the same time, parts that are more robust, so they don't break. So if that means you don't need to replace them. So that's a way to drive sustainability, because like less single use, you use it for longer. And that another way to go further was to say, oh, I want to use sustainable resins. But then to do that, it means way more development cost, and effectively the cost was more expensive. So we looked at it, we did a ton of research and realized that customers were not going to be ready to pay for it. So that's where sometimes, you hit the wall again about the cost, and that you can't drive adoption. On the Waymo side, the good thing is before I arrived, they had decided to go with only electric vehicles. Well, now I can tell you it's hard to have made that choice. And why is it? It's, well, you've seen Waymos, we have the LiDARs and radars on the vehicle, which means there's a lot of requirement for compute and usage of the battery, which means you need to get the car back to be charged pretty often, not very often, but during the day, which means you need to have chargers that are pretty close. And funny enough, I mean, not that funny, but because there's already EV on the street, but not enough chargers. So just to find sites, and sometimes, and I'm 100%, and sometimes we have the discussion, was that the right choice? I have to say, yes, it is. Even if it's costing money or that, yes, we need to do that and drive for that. So that's really like on the vehicle itself. And after, there's the way, we live here, and as employees, where you see it was an Earth Day, like on Monday, so trying to push as much as like, okay. So one thing also that's super interesting is you try to have people to become more vegetarian. And in both companies, I've tried to do meatless lunch. Each time, I couldn't make it happen. It's just like people absolutely want their meat, but and after a while, it's sometimes, you try to push out. However, I feel nothing's never too small. So I want to do like big and small to try to push that. And I think that it's evolving. Mentalities are evolving.
So you push the boundaries, right? Always. And as a woman leader, what boundaries do you feel that you had to push to get to where you are? Talking about boundaries, pushing boundaries.
So I don't know if it's like me pushing versus like finding an environment that was, favorable and open, like to listening to different point of views. Because I would think that really looking and with all the people I worked with, I really think that women don't think the same way men do. So, and it's just a different approach we just have, so in some cases, I mean, I don't want to make things too general or generic either, but sometimes you would say men are more strategic, more conceptual, and women are more like on the operation and execution. It's not always that black and white, but there's a lot, a little bit of that, and that women can grow and become more strategic, and men also can understand that there's a need to go into the details and the execution and not just stay at 10,000 feet. So I think the boundaries is more like effectively for women to understand what needs to happen to become like more well-rounded, and not just like naturally how we would think in detail and execution, and for men to understand that it's also needed to have that other point of view. So for me, the boundaries were more for men to be open to listen to different opinions and ways of looking at things.
Right.
Great. And thank you for that. So staying on this theme of women leadership, and then we'll move to the CFO part right after. So you've worked in very different cultures and environment, and okay, we're the French American Chamber of Commerce here, and I'm interested on your point of view as a French person, being now a leader in a corporate American environment. Any learnings, any advice, or is it something that you did very naturally? Yeah. Anything that you can say to the listeners?
So disclosure, I've not really worked a lot in France, so it's hard, to say that. Even if I was for 7 years at Citroën, which is a French company. But it was in the UK, and it was not many French there. It was only like 10. So the culture was not, I wouldn't say like too French. The good thing, what I see here, more French, non-French here, is like it's so many times here at Waymo is that I realize we're in a room. There's no like Native American. It's just like all the leadership team,
Interesting.
we
Wow.
all come from different backgrounds. And
Wow,
that's like,
that's very
I realize,
special because I mean, I spent time, sorry to speak about myself, but spent time with Google, and honestly, that was not the case at all. People were very, very American centric, so that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah.
So here it's very, and it's nice because we all have our different accents. So it's like I don't feel bad about mine because they also have all of theirs. But it's true that we have so that's really good in that sense. And I feel now also, with all the valley, and you would think the same, Catherine, that you've lived that through. I mean, it changed a lot over the last 10 years, and all the DEI investment and an awareness. Now, I don't think, people think anymore, oh, you're that or you're that. It's more, we're like all, there's a culture per company, that's for sure. But now, within that, I don't think people really like distinguish, where you're coming from and whether you are at an advantage or disadvantage if you're from so and so country. So
Right.
that's why, as a French, I've never. So yeah, one thing to say, there's not many French though. No. Maybe it'd be nice if we had a few more, but I don't feel like, and I don't have. At one point, I had a little bit of that. At Carbon, they used to remind me all the time, but in a nice way, because France has that nice thing about us that it's that's some echo, that they like
That's
the
so
food. Everyone's always talking to you about Paris or this or that. So it's nice. Sometimes I would see it more like as an advantage sometimes, because it helps you start, and have something to talk about, even with someone you've never met.
conversation opener. Great. And switching gears again, sorry, but you have so many interesting facets to yourself and your career. So we wanted also to talk a little bit about the CFO role, because some persons are also interested in this aspect. So you did many different, indeed, you had many different CFO positions. So would you say that your current role of CFO at Waymo is different compared to your other roles? Or yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about the different aspects of the role that you've developed?
So broadly speaking, when you think about CFO, you effectively usually have like two angles, or people are either coming from the FP&A so FP&A, financial planning and analysis, and execution operational side, or banking background, and either they come from the big banks and they've done merger and acquisition or big deals. So and depending on what the company is looking for and the stage of the company, sometimes they when you're hired with this or that profile. So with my profile, I'm more coming, of course, from the operation and execution side of the house, and that's usually where you try to start a business. You're in the building phase, and that's what happened, with both Carbon and here Waymo. So that's the angle. Now, the good thing is after, and again, when I was said I always want to learn and add more, yeah, I started that, but each time, I learn and I have new experiences, which now I'm building blocks, but I will never be considered, a banker. I'm a banker, a CFO, but at least I can talk to bankers now. Well, when I left Apple, I couldn't, because Apple is also like such a secret company that, it was just, you were not allowed to talk to anyone. So it was like that's the other thing I could have added why I wanted to leave Apple. It was like at one point, it was such a shame to be in the valley and not being able, to reach out or to have like a network, which now with Carbon and where I'm at now, I mean, it's much bigger than what it was back then. I couldn't have done this interview at Apple, because
Wow.
no way they would have allowed, so. And all this to say that, yeah, of course you can add, and so that in the role of the CFO, so effectively, so there's these two aspects. So me at Carbon, I added, the fundraising and preparation for a potential IPO, and that's where, all the interaction with bankers, with investors. So that's how I learned all of that, and now applying it here. Now, having said that, whether you're coming from one side or the other, if you're missing some skill set, the good thing is you hire the experts. You hire the experts under you. And that's where you shouldn't be worried that if it's not, you don't need to know everything about everything, as long as like what you still like, you're able to ask the right question, you're able to challenge, and then have the experts that can also help you, make first do the analysis and then come to you, and then after you make the final decisions.
So in fact, we see more similarities between your role as CFO at Carbon and your role at Waymo than it was at Apple. Because Waymo is like a startup, right, within this huge environment.
Yes, completely. You're right. Yeah. It's we are effectively private. Mm-hmm. So it appears that our main investor is Google, but
correct.
We are private, and we have like the same, funding cycle as like a startup. We're completely independent in the sense of like we decide our strategy. We have a board, so in that we have the exact same, and we have board with external board members, not just Google.
Very interesting.
So we have it's exactly the same, and that's what helped me, by the way, back to the network, and that it's we had common board members between Carbon and Waymo.
Very interesting.
So that's also how all of this
transitioned smoothly finally. Yes. And was kind of a logical path somehow.
Yes, yeah, that helps for references.
Correct.
A little trick. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And so again, talking about, being a CFO at very innovative companies like Carbon and now Waymo, does it mean that you need to be more creative in a way, or, more strategic? So is it different from being a CFO of more established, businesses?
I would say yes, because you're building something new. So in that sense, you don't have, not that established companies, because you always have competition, challenge, so you're ahead of the curve. But here there's not even like a curve, we're building the curve. So like when you have to make decisions, or when you have to decide, where to invest, because the role of the CFO also mostly is like what are the priorities and where do you invest? because of course you have a lot of people are going to come with their project and say, oh, me first, me, it's more interesting, it's more important. So what you have to do is just like identify, okay, what's really core, because you have a limited amount of money. So where do we think we should place our bets? So when effectively you're building something from scratch, yes, there's some literature and that, but I mean, now on self-driving, honestly, I mean, some people have some theories, but it's, you need to constantly, look around what's happening, and at the end of the day, do what you believe or you feel in your guts. So in that sense, that's where you need to effectively be creative, but also at the same time rational. And that's where, as a CFO, and me being with number driven, and that I add, because you'll have, like you mentioned, product people. Yeah, they'll come also with a lot of like very good ideas or like what to do. So that's where we need to embrace the idea and the new thing, but at the same time, like put some rationale behind it when it's time to then decide what to do. And what's hard is like, you never know if it's the right answer. So that's where that comes a little bit like the pressure, I'd say, of the job.
Yeah, and the challenge somehow. Yeah, absolutely. And to get back to the woman role, I mean, and advice, I mean, what advice would you give to professionals and young women willing to join the industry, the tech industry at large, and assume similar role and get to where you are at this stage?
So there's some that can be women, and others like just I can think about how to become a CFO. So maybe I can do the two. But women, it's the good thing is that compared to when I started, and now I also feel there's an evolution, that now it's more accepted, like maternity leave and knowing that you have to take care of your kids is more accepted. And especially now, that I think it's a great thing that dads now have a paternity leave, because it shows that it's not just women, it's both. So then now it's something that's accepted. So in that sense, that's good. Back 15 years ago was not as obvious. And sometimes you kind of had like to, unfortunately, just like give priority to either your career or your family. Now it feels that you can maybe manage both a bit better. Well, again, I always want to thank my husband, because I would have never been able to do or to be where I'm at without him. And of course, like the two of us being aligned, that we both wanted to have a career, and that it was not just me to do shopping and look after the kids. And it was always like a given that he would do his share. And so that's super important. So making sure that you have help. And after, if it's not that, I mean, it's external help. One thing also is that you evolve also over time. I mean, at the beginning, I really, I wanted to do everything myself. I wanted to make sure I would look at the homework of my kids. I was sure I would do the CNED with them like every night. And until I realized, well, I can't, it's just like too much. So you need to look, I mean, that's what I did. At one point I delegated, and it's, yeah, I liked it. It was nice to delegate. So finding the right, childcare to help and delegate, I felt like was very, very important to be able to then have like quality time with your kids. So that's what I would say, like on the women's side, after like how to evolve and to grow and get more responsibility. I'd say when I'm trying to rethink about my trend in the career, one thing for sure I saw is like having a good boss and working well with your manager. I mean, that's very important, because at the end of the day, it's your manager who's going to help you continue to grow, and he's going to advocate for you.
Correct.
So making sure that effectively that relationship, and that you serve the manager, and that you show that you're working as a team. So that's super important. And another one, I'd say, examples of what I've heard and how I got there, is that and I've heard it a lot in these last few years, and at Carbon, it's funny, I had not realized it. It was like, oh, what's good and nice with you is that you always put Carbon first or Waymo first. It's not you first. So, and I think like effectively, like, well, it's nice. Sometimes you need to advocate for yourself, but there's a way to do it. So when there's like some people that are constantly, like just trying to, then it feels like it's just for them and not in the interest of the team or the company. And then it can rub, like people the wrong way. So being humble in the sense and doing it for the company, a good relationship with your manager, I think how few good little tricks.
That's
Yeah.
really good advice.
Mindset. Yeah.
That's really sound advice indeed, and basic, but so true. Great. And so I think that, sorry, go ahead, Isabel.
No, I was wondering if you ever needed or feel the need to have a mentor, or if yourself was ever in a position of mentoring.
So yeah, it was like a little bit. We talked a lot at one point about mentors, and in some companies they try to implement some mentorship program. So I know some people are doing it. I've never done it. I've always felt it felt too forced and not natural. And the only one time I tried, it just didn't work out. So it was more like an informal mentorship with like, I have like 3, I'd say, managers that have followed me all along and helped me along. And even now in my role at Waymo, when I have some very pointed question, I go back to one of them.
Very interesting.
But initially it was not built as like, oh, you're my mentor.
Yeah, it came naturally.
Yeah.
Within this relationship that you built together, right?
Yes, exactly. So but again, maybe after, it depends, because I know that regularly companies relaunch these type of programs, so which I imagine may be working. It's just that in my case, I didn't see it. And to your question, so does that, no, I'm not mentoring anyone. So, but maybe more like in the discussions
Correct.
But being a manager, because of the team, I have open hours. We do regular meetings. I do a lot of like ask me anything questions and that, and I try to be the open door philosophy or policy, so that it's a kind of a way to do mentorship.
Yeah, it's 2 ways. In fact, they learn from you, and you learn from your team, and yeah, very interesting. Yeah, thank you, Elisa. Catherine.
Yes, sure. And so we're talking specifically about mentoring, but are there any, I would say, specific inspiring, persons that you met, or maybe managers, that you met in your career and that really help you to be inspired and continue to be inspiring yourself?
Yes. So yeah, of course. And but without looking, so I got lucky in the sense that I've worked with like very very smart and inspiring people. But the Apple, of course, was really one of them. And I joined Apple, like I said, before the phone. And at the time, you remember that it was Steve Jobs was the guy everyone was like talking about. So for sure, but I've never worked with Steve Jobs, but he was like, like an inspiration in the sense, wow, this guy is like, he sees the future. He's like, and there's still a lot of like things that are done thinking about how he was thinking about product and launching a product, or his view of the world. But that was more like a very out there, because I knew I would never be on that track for like to be anywhere near that guy. But being after all, for my 10 years, I worked with Tim Cook a lot. And like for in corporate FP&A, like every month, I was meeting with him. So what was super interesting, and at the time when I started, he was not yet the CEO. And after he grew into the role, and how he grew and how he became, the leader he is now. And back to the humility I was talking about, like, because when I was the first time in the meeting with him, it was like, what really struck me was like, oh, he's a normal person. Felt like, okay, he's like you and me. And like, because I always imagined that, these guys up there, they're like superstars. And in fact, no. And, and some of the topics, sometimes were like so down to earth, like even like nearly grocery shopping or stuff like that. So it was funny to see that you can be, like such an image, outside, but in fact, and in your day to day and the way you operate, you're like a normal person. So that's on that really helped me to see, okay, that's feasible. These people, we can be them.
That's reassuring.
It's not fully true. Yeah, it's reassuring. And after, what I really liked, and that is analytical skills. I mean, this guy is like so detailed and so so analytical and so calm. Never, I mean, whatever the issue or that, it's just like, well, sometimes we had like big challenges, and he would look at something and just say at the end, are we going to see the light at the end of the tunnel? Yeah, maybe, yes. So that's, and you say it like in words, like that. So that was so surprising, but very inspiring, just to show that all our it was managing and doing it in such a way that it was like so so human and again, inspiring. So.
Wow, great. So I'm going to read some questions that were in the meeting chat. So you answered some of them, but some of them not yet. So there is a question: were there ever times you made a career choice and you later realized you had to make a change because it wasn't the right fit? Did it happen to you?
But you course correct kind of like over time. But the only time I remember that I really made a choice, and I will never know if my life would have been completely different or not, and that's why I said the different types of CFOs, is when I moved to London, I had the opportunity to go into M&A. And I decided not to. I think that was like the hardest or the biggest fork I had at my life. And I did it like consciously because I didn't want to travel. I had a kid then and I decided not to. And after, I had roles I loved more than others. And that's why also sometimes I try to constantly change regularly. So then to, again, go into what I like. So, it's been more a little bit incremental, more than that, something that I did and wouldn't have done.
Good. No, thanks. I mean, that's interesting. And the, of course, I mean, every career is different. Another question from the chat, which is more, I would say, prospective in a way. So, assuming men and women are wired differently, what would be women's contribution to AI? So, that's kind of a more open question.
Hallucinate less. maybe more down to earth on like the answers. But it's true for sure. I mean, here we see it a lot. We try to be to have like women here in engineering, and it's difficult. And I was hearing that even like in engineering schools now, there's less women going into the engineering career than they even used to be. So I really think that yes, women bring a different way and a different angle. So I think it's important. The problem is like if there's not enough in the pipeline, how do you bring in women and can they get into roles? At Waymo, it's incredible. You can look and we have a deliberate policy to try to have women in, but you can look in like sometimes in the internal I can't remember. It's called MoMA. I can't remember where you see the the hierarchy. You can have 5 layers of men. Like so, it's hard for me to say what Theoretically, I can see how can women can bring like a different perspective, but after we also need to be realistic about like how
No,
many we have and how much they can influence.
no, that's very interesting what you're saying, because I know that indeed Waymo and Google, they are doing efforts to try to recruit. So maybe that's a message for everybody who has, daughters or young, or everybody that's starting their career. There are probably a lot of opportunities out there, because I'm sure that you would welcome, where more women in the field than what they are now. But yeah, it's a problem indeed. So I think we can open, by the way, to the participants. I think that I saw Delphine, that you raised your hand at a point of time.
I did. Hi.
For a question. Yeah.
Hi, Delphine.
Raising hand. Thank you. Hi, Elisa. Nice to meet you. Curious, we were just talking about AI, and more likely how you are leveraging AI, if you do, within your function in finance. Is it something that you're embracing more? Talking before about analytics is like, curious to see, depending how much you can share, how Google is in that way, from an investor pushing into more of the new technologies.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about it, and of course, especially when you're the CFO and in finance, and you want to drive your costs down, you say, okay, so let's try and use AI to build efficiency and scale, especially for us now that we are at this inflection point of like scaling. And as you know, on G&A, you try to make it as low as possible as like your cost structure. So now it's the theory, it's how you're thinking about it. Now, what does that mean when you try to put it into application? And it's interesting because I've been asking my team for the last 6 months, okay, come tell me what it means for your teams. And we had like a review with Deloitte last week where they told us, because with Google, they've been working on that. They've been looking, different of their clients have been asking for that. And honestly, it was not super inspiring. And it's still what it is. And that's what I told them is, so are you just telling me that it's more using some systems that in their core and in their features are going to use AI in their product? And yes, that's what it is. So it's just like another system. So accounts payable, for instance, and they all come back with accounts payable. It feels like, okay, a better way, a more optimized way of like processing invoices and paying invoices. But so, yeah, okay, fine, fair enough. I'm not very surprised that this is like the low hanging fruit. If you think about analysis or FP&A or that, honestly, yeah, Anaplan can make an effort, to do even more. And I'm sure, and they're working on that. But for the role of like the finance person, the business partnering, understanding, it's not yet clear how AI is really going to change anything in the way we are working. So it will take time, it will evolve, but I'm sure that over time we'll end up needing less people, but it's not going to be like that automatic, and you're not going to see, teams. You've heard, I'm sure, about legal, that they say, oh yeah, and after, of course, legal team is going to say, no, because no, there's so many specificities in the contracts that you can't let the machine do that, which is fair. And then you can say, but yeah, maybe the machine can skim all what's standard and identify what's non-standard, and then that's when you add. So there's a lot of discussions, but whether it's converting, not yet.
Yeah, it won't replace your strategic thinking as a CFO.
No,
somehow.
no,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Patrick, who doesn't want to talk. He wants to write, I see. The question that says, Waymo has done an incredible job on customer experience, and that's a huge asset above and beyond changing mobility. How can they share their knowledge on customer experience?
They share. But I think the good way is that, I don't know what you would expect as an answer, but what I'm seeing is like more cars. If you have more cars, it means customers are happy. It means that people are coming back. And then because again, we wouldn't want to put on the road, too many cars if like after you don't get some profitability out of it. I'm talking from my CFO angle. So if we have more cars and we see the scale, it means the customers are really happy. It means that the customers want more, and hence we put more cars on the road. After what you're saying, yeah, there's some blogs. There's some blogs. There we have our blog. We try to show our customer experiences. We're also having a lot trying to work with communities, with disabled or whether it's blind or less favored community in areas that can't be reached. We have a strong belief that we can really help in that area too. So trying to be effectively very customer centric in that sense.
Thank you. There's another question from Anne-Fleur. When do you think driverless cars will be mainstream? Haha. Where's your crystal ball, Elisa?
Where's my crystal ball? So there's when I think and when I would like it to be. So maybe when I would like it to be is as soon as possible, but not just me as Waymo, is also as a driver. I don't know about you, but first, I don't like to be stuck in traffic jam all the time, and at least it's wasted time. I don't like some of the people that are driving like crazy. So so for that, as a customer, I'd like it to be as soon as possible. Now, in terms of like customer adoption, I think the next 2 years are going to be super interesting, just to see effectively how, with the cities we're in, how the customer adoption comes and how much we manage to convert. One interesting point was like, I don't know if you followed, but it got delayed and delayed for us to got the permit in San Francisco. And there was a lot of like people mobilized. I mean, for and against, by the way, but we got it in August. And we thought, oh, it's going to be so difficult to get the permit in LA and to get it for the rest of the Bay. And no, we got it. So it's just, like the momentum. So it could well accelerate. It could accelerate, or, a big incident happens. You've seen what happened with Cruise. You never know. I mean, of course, with our safety first, that's not, we hopefully will not be in that position, but you never know. You never know. If something big happens, how is the public going to react? And it may shut it all down. I mean, again, hopefully not, because we're doing a lot of work to be very transparent, explain the approach, giving information to all, whether it's a DMV, CPUC, NHTSA. So we're working a lot with regulators to help with that adoption. And so we'll see how it goes, but hopefully mainstream soon.
But
And
what would you say mainstream?
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
what would you say would be mainstream? Because again, we're in a bubble here. Where
Yes,
are the
fair enough.
doctors? And we have to think, and conjoined to that, the issue of that you mentioned with electric cars about not enough charging stations around. That's what I'm thinking. Like, I know it's crystal ball, but you're certainly more informed than any of us here.
China is pushing it. China's pushing it a lot. Baidu is really like, and they're saying they're going to be in 10 cities in like 5 years or less. So they're putting a lot of investment there. I don't know, the UK is pretty well advanced too. It's interesting. They have a few startups, and they just announced like a little bus like yesterday that is like in London. It's true that France, Germany, and that for the moment on the regulation standpoint, they're not, I mean, they're a little bit slow. But I'm really hoping that once that we see showcases like that in San Francisco and that working, then the others will start thinking, we want to catch that train. We want to be in that innovative curve.
And the sustainability factor must influence the city's decision, right? I mean, it must be a motivation to do this switch, right?
Yeah, so after it will be effectively the integration with the public transportation.
Right, exactly.
Currently, and so that's the next step. Definitely.
It can push the regulation in a more favorable way because of this sustainability concern or factor. Yeah. Do we have any?
Well, it's time to wrap up in any case, so we're good on time.
Perfect. Yeah, wonderful.
Right.
Elisa, do you have any final word, piece of advice to share with our audience today?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's great to have like these open discussions and on any topic. It's like you never know, if your experience is worth sharing or not. But it's true that
I think it was super
Very
worthwhile.
insightful.
At least, yeah, it was
Thank
super
you.
insightful.
Thank you for the
And
comments.
thanks a lot for all the insights about, all these different aspects. And
And
yeah,
subjects.
very grateful for your very candid and insightful answers. And I can see, so probably you cannot read at the same time, Elisa, but there are a lot of thank yous in the chat too. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. And thank you to Elisa, of course, to
Thank
Isabelle and Catherine for organizing this session. And see you everyone soon for our next Meet the Leader series. Thank you
Very
much.
inspiring program. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Yeah, that was very good. Thank you.
A lot. Bye.
That's
Bye.